So hypothyroidism is one of those diseases that, sometimes we don't know what to do about. And it can be caused by lots of different things, but Hashimoto's thyroiditis is probably the most common, and I shouldn't say probably, the most common cause of hypothyroidism in the United States. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight on this episode. Hashimoto's thyroiditis, hypothyroidism, the symptoms, what's the truth about hypothyroidism and Hashimoto's. If you're new to me, this is Dr. Dwayne Wood. That's Wood with an E. The E stands for endocrinology. Here on the channel, I educate, I empower, and I encourage you to take charge of your health, take charge of your life, avoid complications, and go to the next level. Yeah, that's what we do. I hope you've had a great weekend and you are right now having a great Monday, right? As we get into the new year, as we get into the new week, I guess I should say. And as we get into the new year, can you believe it already? We are in the third week of this month. We are in the third week of 2023. Wow, time is just flying by. And today we celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And, I am just so excited and so honored to be able to stand on the shoulders of those who went before us and to stand on the shoulders of this amazing man. This is a proclamation that the White House put out earlier today. It says, today we honor the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by continuing his unfinished work to redeem the soul of America. So just excited that we are able to celebrate that. So all of you who are out there, all of you who've taken the time out to do that, we are very excited that he did all the things that he did. And we won't get into all of those, but it is a time for us to come aside and to really, as a community, as a country, to continue working along this legacy that he has for us. So glad that we were able to do that. And so back to my, so glad that you are here. Once again, if you're here, go ahead and put your name, put new in the comments, because we want to give you a welcome. And I see Eddie, hey man. Give you some hand claps and also give you some music to help you and welcome you to the show. So glad that you are here. If you're out there right now, go ahead and send the link to somebody. Let them know that we are here. I'm excited. I'm excited because there's so much in this new year that we want to do, so much in last year that we did. And let me hop over. If you've not already been to our YouTube channel, let me pop over. Make sure you get over there. And this is just a listing of some of the things that are there. Right now, we have about 314 videos, right? 314 videos that we've done on everything from diabetes. And you'll remember that we did Diabetes 101. That was back in November for Diabetes Awareness Month. We last month during the month of December was when we did our Vlogmas. And so we had some amazing folks that came through. So if you've not already done so, make sure you get over there and do that. And I always am excited. Where's my, let me get over here. I'm gonna go over to one of my shorts. This is one of my favorite shorts, and this is one that I did with a couple of friends of mine. So for New Year's, the things that you came through, there's somebody right now who's going through it, somebody that will go through it. Mm-hmm. And you have successfully made it through. Even if you think, oh my God, I just blundered my way through, there's somebody right now who's blundering their way through that needs help on how to blunder their way through. So we had such a good time. We had fun. We had fun with those, and you'll see all those shorts that I'm kind of scrolling through right now. Just a wealth of information. If you've not done so, make sure you get over there and make sure you watch some of those, because there are some amazing things that you will see once you get on the channel. And I see Florence is here as well. Hey, Florence, what's up? So Eddie says, hey, doctor. And then Florence says, good morning. That's right, Florence, it's morning for you where you are right now, right? All right. So so many things are going through my head. So diabetes, so Thyroid Awareness Month. Thyroid Awareness Month is the month of January. And during this month, we want to highlight the thyroid. And tonight we're starting the next 3 videos, the next 3 episodes of our show that we're going to do. We're going to be focusing on thyroid. There may be some other things that we throw in there, but want to spend some time talking about the thyroid. And tonight I'm talking about, and let me pop back over to my screen right here. Let's get this one off. So now we're talking about the thyroid. The thyroid is a gland that sits at the base of the neck. And I always say that I've got to get a bow tie, and I'm going to put it on whenever I talk about the thyroid, because that's where it really is located. If you imagine me with a bow tie, that's what the thyroid would be, right? So part of it is below the collarbone, part is above the collarbone. It wraps around the anterior part of the neck under these muscles, these neck muscles that are here. And that's where it sits. Sits almost like if you can imagine a choker. You know, those. If you think about those Egyptian princesses or the pharaoh, and they used to wear that big thing right there. Yeah, so that's where it sits, right about here. Okay, so sometimes people will say to me, "My thyroid is hurting." Right? Let me pop over to this screen. So people will say, "My thyroid is hurting," and they're pointing up under their jaw. And I'll say to them, well, that's not the thyroid, right? Because the thyroid is much lower than they are indicating. So that's where the thyroid is. And whenever we talk about the thyroid, we cannot talk about the thyroid without talking about the pituitary, because the pituitary is the gland in the brain. It's a pea-sized gland that sends the hormones that control the thyroid, okay? And we'll come back again in maybe another video, probably not this month, and where we talk about the regulation from the brain of the thyroid. But tonight we're talking about Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. So what does the thyroid do? What does the thyroid do? Well, the thyroid is responsible for energy. The thyroid is responsible for your energy regulation, and everybody has kind of, heard the thyroid as it relates to metabolism. So what does that really mean? It means that anytime there is energy that's needed in the body, the thyroid has to be involved. Let me say that again. Anytime energy is needed in the body, the thyroid is involved, right? So if your heart needs to go faster, there are nervous system things that help, but the thyroid ultimately allows the energy that's needed to have your heart go faster. How tall you are, right, is regulated by genetics and other things, but the thyroid gives the energy for you to grow. How much weight you put on, that is how big you are, how small you are, right? Everything as simple as you walking up the stairs, the muscles that you're using to walk up and down the stairs, they need energy. And guess where the energy comes from? It's regulated by the thyroid. I tell people that the thyroid is kind of like a dimmer switch on the light bulb. You walk in the room and you need energy, you need the light, but you don't need as much. So the thyroid allows the body to regulate how much energy goes to different places. So if your hair wants to grow and your thyroid says no, then your hair can't grow. Yeah. Right? And that's a simple explanation of it, right? But that gives you the crux of what the thyroid does. So when people talk about the metabolism or energy regulation of the thyroid, that is what they are. That's what they're meaning. Okay. So that's what the thyroid does. Well, so hypothyroidism is when the thyroid doesn't work properly, right? So as we talk about thyroid disease, right, and there are lots of different types of thyroid disease. Tonight, specifically, we're talking about hypothyroidism, but we can also talk about hyper or overactive thyroid. We could talk about having thyroid nodules. We can talk about having thyroid cancer, right? So lots of different things that we can talk about when you talk about thyroid disease. Specifically tonight, we're talking about hypo or an underactive thyroid. Underactive thyroid. When we talk about thyroid, hypothyroidism, in the United States, as I mentioned, the most common cause of hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is actually what it's called. It can lead to hypothyroidism. So what is Hashimoto's thyroiditis? So Hashimoto's is it is where the body attacks the thyroid. It's where the body attacks the thyroid. What does that mean? So let's talk a little bit about an autoimmune disease, an autoimmune process. When it comes to the body has many systems to help it protect itself. One of those is this thing called an antibody. So let me give you an example. This is how I envision an antibody. So at your house, wherever you live, you can go out and you can buy an alarm system to put in your house. Or you can go out and you can get some security guards to come to the house. And the security guards, right? Let's assume that that's what you decide. You're going to get some security guards. And the security guards come to the house and they're surveying, right? They're standing around your house and they're looking to see if there are any robbers, anybody who's coming in, any thieves, right? They're protecting your house. They're protecting your house. So let's assume that you, one night, you go to sleep and the company sends out 10 guys to surround your house to protect the house. And, 6 robbers come. And so, right, so 6 of the security guys grab 6 of the robbers, they take them away. Well, there are 4 guys left, right? And what happens in the body, those 4 guys that are left that were supposed to be protecting the house, they're just hanging around. And nobody's coming, nobody's robbing. They've been there every night they come and nobody comes to break into your house. And these guys are kind of, slack, if you will. And so they start looking for stuff, they're like, wait a minute, his porch doesn't look so good. And so what they start doing, they kind of break up the porch, right? They're going to fix the porch. They're going to take the bricks out of the porch. They look at your window and say, hey, I don't like the way that window looks, right? So they start tearing stuff off your window. They, go to the back of the house and they see that, the water pipe, right? They don't like the water pipe. So they take the water pipe apart. Now notice that those guys were supposed to be there to protect it, to protect the house. But they're now finding stuff around the house that they think needs to be fixed. And so they start trying to fix the house, if you will. And in the process, what they're actually doing is they're tearing the house down. Does that make sense? Right? Okay. Now here's another example. And this is the way I think of what happens eventually. And now we're going to switch from these security guards because that's what the antibodies are. But those antibodies are damaging the house. And today as I was preparing for this, I said, what's another example that people may be able to relate to? Well, here's a crude one, but I'm going to use it anyway. So I saw this cooking show and the guy took some chicken and he put it between the saran wrap and he got a tenderizer. And what does he do? He starts hitting on the chicken, right? So tenderizing the chicken. That is essentially what these antibodies do to the thyroid. They're hitting on the thyroid. They're beating the thyroid. And eventually, right, for the chicken, the reason you're beating the chicken, you're tenderizing it. What are you doing? You're breaking up the fibers in the chicken or whatever meat it is that you're cooking. You're breaking up the fibers. Well, these antibodies, they cause the same kind of damage to the thyroid. So there's a cell in the thyroid that's supposed to be making hormone, but now you've hit it with this mallet and that cell can no longer make thyroid hormone. Does that make sense? So that's the process that's going on. So these antibodies, they're supposed to be protecting the house. They now turn against the thyroid and they start causing damage to the thyroid. That is what essentially Hashimoto's hypothyroid or Hashimoto's disease is. Notice I paused there. Not Hashimoto's hypothyroidism yet, but Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So it's an inflammation of the thyroid. It's an inflammatory process. When those antibodies are affecting the thyroid, when they're beating up on the thyroid, when they're damaging the thyroid, they're causing inflammation. And as a result, you can think, let's go back and let's use some things that you know. So if you get a cut on your hand, or you hit your hand with a hammer, or you do something that damages, that process that you see, the swelling, the redness that happens, that is called inflammation. It's an inflammatory process. And then what's going on at that point is that the body is sending cells to repair the damage that was done. That's just what's happening. You're repairing those damage. And those antibodies that you see, those antibodies that are affecting the thyroid, they're causing inflammation. So as the thyroid is sitting in the neck, all these antibodies now are coming and they're causing damage. Now, there is not a way for us to get rid of the antibodies. I guess let me pause there. There's not a way for us to get rid of the antibodies. We're going to talk about some things here in a minute that may be beneficial for that. Okay? So ultimately, then, our thyroid, if it is damaged and it can't produce the amount of hormone that we need, then we've got to do something to fix it and to help to regulate the body. So let's pause here for a minute and let's have another conversation. So hypothyroidism can result from this Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Okay, does that make sense? Because as those antibodies are damaging the tissue, then the amount of hormone that the body makes, that kind of goes down. Yes? All right. There are people who have Hashimoto. So they have the antibodies, and the antibodies are continually causing damage in the thyroid. But the body, the thyroid, is able to make enough hormone so that their body is regulated. So let me say that again. So this Hashimoto's, this thyroiditis, this inflammatory process that's going on, it is causing damage, but the thyroid continues to produce hormone. So that even though someone has Hashimoto's thyroiditis, their thyroid still works. And their body produces enough hormone so that it's able to regulate all the things that are going on. So hypothyroidism, the most common cause is Hashimoto's thyroiditis, but not everyone who has Hashimoto's thyroiditis gets hypothyroidism. It's kind of like, let's see, what's a good example? So you guys have cars, right? So there's a car. So you have a car, red car, blue car, whatever color, and you go outside and you see your car. You're like, hey, okay, that's my car. Somebody says, oh, you got a blue car. You're like, yes, I do. Right? So that's Hashimoto's. You have this autoimmune process that's going on in your body. And they say, hey, wait a minute, your blue car has a flat tire. So now we fix the flat tire. There's nothing we can do about the blue car itself, but we can fix the flat tire. Does that make sense? So all blue cars are there, they run, but it's not until we have a flat tire that we fix something, right? And hold on to that idea. We're going to come back and we're going to make a little modification to that here in a little bit. Okay, and I hope that's making sense to you. So Hashimoto's thyroiditis is an inflammatory process. It's an autoimmune process that the body is fighting against itself, right? And it is causing damage to the tissues, and that's what those antibodies are. So how do we go about evaluating? How do we go about thinking about hypothyroidism? So let's back up and let's talk about Hashimoto's. So Hashimoto's is an inflammatory process, autoimmune, once again, that can lead to hypothyroidism, not all the time. So if it's an inflammatory process, then the Hashimoto's thyroiditis, if we can somehow decrease the inflammation, then theoretically, that doesn't cause the same kind of damage or doesn't cause as much damage. And that's the idea that a lot of people have about how to treat the Hashimoto's. Like I said, there's no way for us to get rid of the antibodies But there is some thought that if we can decrease the inflammation in the body, then we don't develop the antibodies, or we can minimize the antibodies, or we can decrease the inflammation that the antibodies are causing. And so how do we go about doing that? We're going to talk about that here in just a moment. Let's assume that you have the Hashimoto's and you are one of the people that develops the hypothyroidism, right? It's gone. The tissues are damaged. There's no way to repair the tissues. Then we would go on to treat with hormones, right? We treat with hormone replacement. And one of the things that we do as we're evaluating people with hypothyroidism or symptoms of hypothyroidism is we look at their blood work. We look at their blood work. And you'll see as you talk to your doctors, there are some specific ranges that we talk about when we talk about the function of the thyroid. So for most cases, and this may differ depending on the lab you go, right? But the idea is exactly the same. There are ranges that we have for the different hormones. And let's talk about two of them. There are others that we can talk about. We're going to talk about two. One is what's called the thyroid stimulating hormone, which is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. That comes from the brain. And as I mentioned, that's what comes from the pituitary. So the pituitary regulates it. And then the thyroid itself gives off, there are two hormones, T3 and T4, but we'll talk about the T4 here. And specifically, we'll talk about free T4. You don't have to remember those names right now, but just know that there's one from the brain and one from the thyroid. And when the thyroid needs more hormone, when your body needs more hormone, the brain sends a signal to the thyroid and the thyroid increases the amount of hormone it makes. For example, let's assume that right now your thyroid is perfect. Okay, you don't have hypothyroidism, you don't have hyperthyroidism. It's a normal thyroid. If you live in a warm climate and I picked you up and I took you to a cold climate, took you to the Arctic, for example, then your body would need to generate heat, right? Because it's cold. So the brain kicks in, right? That pituitary kicks in and it sends a signal to the thyroid that says, hey, I need more hormone. I need more hormone. And so the thyroid increases the amount of hormone that it makes. And then your body is able to generate heat. Okay. And let's assume that we got your levels normalized up there, right? Once again, you're not hypothyroidism because your body's working perfectly. Now we took you back to a warmer climate. Right? We took you to, I don't know, Arizona. We took you to the Caribbean, took you to Africa somewhere on the continent, took you to Australia. All right. Once you got there, then the brain would say, hey, I don't need to generate that much heat anymore. Right? So the brain says, hey, I don't have to keep sending that signal for me to get more thyroid hormone. And now the thyroid hormone that your body makes may go down. So notice what happens. The body is able to regulate itself. When you're cold, it is able to give you more hormone, and when you're hot, it gives you less. So there are some people, now let's hop to people who are hypothyroidism or have hypothyroidism. There are some people who they are having to change their medication at different times of the year because why? Because the temperature is different. So there's nothing wrong in their body. There's nothing wrong that's going on. It's just that their body needs different amounts of hormone, a different amount of hormone at different times. Because if you're taking a medication, if you take a pill, let's say that pill has, I don't know, say it's 100 micrograms. For those of you who know that, the doses, right? Say it's 100 micrograms. And for everybody else, that's fine. 100 micrograms. Right? So you're taking your pill every day and your numbers are perfect. Well, now you move to Alaska. It's cold in Alaska. And you need more hormone. Well, the pill doesn't know that you need more. It's only 100. It can only give you 100. So if you're in Alaska and you're taking your 100, then potentially you don't feel as well, right? because in Alaska you need more, but the pill can only give you 100. So you'd have to change your dose, go up on your dose. Now let's do the opposite. Now let's go back. Let's go to Australia, right? Because we're moving to Australia, down under, right? Because we can do that. We moved to Australia. And so now we're going to go to Australia. And when we look at our numbers in Australia, it looks like we have too much. Why? Because the pill you're taking 100, you can only get 100. It can't go down to 75 because it's giving you 100. That's all it knows. So in that case, you have to decrease your dose of hormone. Okay. So if you're out there and you know someone who has hypothyroidism, put yes. Put yes in the comments. If you know someone who has hypothyroidism, put yes in the comments. All right. So I'm hoping that that's making sense to you, right? So the brain is controlling the thyroid, and it is helping to regulate what happens in terms of the thyroid numbers based on the requirements of the body. And then on top of that, we're going to superimpose this idea of the Hashimoto's thyroiditis, because that causes damage to the thyroid. So the thyroid can't make the hormone that it needs. So let's assume, and we're going to assume again, that same person, now they're hypothyroid, let's go before they become hypothyroid. So they have this Hashimoto's that's kind of beating up on the thyroid. And the thyroid is still making some hormone. But now they move to Alaska. And the body needs more. Well, if there's been enough damage to the thyroid, when you move to Alaska, your body can't respond. Even though wherever you live, normally, that amount of hormone that the thyroid is making was normal, was good for you, and you were functioning, everything felt good, everything was great, you didn't have any symptoms, you didn't have anything what's going on. Now you move to a place where your body needs to regulate the hormone better. So you need more. And now, because it can't do that, then you run into trouble and you begin having symptoms. So it is possible to have Hashimoto's thyroiditis and not having any symptoms until the body reaches a point where it needs, right, some kind of stress is going on, right? Because during stress, theoretically, we need more hormone. You move to someplace that's colder, something else is going on in the body that requires more hormone. Then in those cases, even though you've been fine all the time, now you can run into trouble where the thyroid is not able to increase. It's not able to increase the things that you need. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So once again, if you know somebody who has hypothyroidism, go ahead and put that in the comments there. All right. So we've kind of walked through the inflammatory process. We've walked through how the thyroid is regulated. And so ultimately, whenever we're talking about thyroid disease, our goal is to normalize normalize the levels, and then to help you feel better. So we'll talk about what some of the symptoms are there in a minute. So as we're testing the thyroid, the two numbers, like I said, we mentioned TSH and free T4. TSH and free T4 are two of the numbers that we use to decide what's going on. So normally, and once again, this may differ depending on the lab, and they're slightly different. So the difference in the lab does not make a difference in the treatment. Different labs have different reference ranges. So that doesn't mean that if you go to one lab and their reference range is different from a different lab, that there's something wrong between them. They just have different references, but as long as you are in the reference range, you are okay. So let's talk a little bit about that. So TSH, the normal TSH goes anywhere from 0.5 to about 4.5. So 4.5. 0.5 to 4.5. That's what the body regulates, right? So that's the amount that the brain gives off. TSH, 0.5 to 4.5. And you can be anywhere within that range, depending on where you are, depending on what's going on metabolism wise. So for that range, if we, for instance, go to Alaska and you're normally in, I don't know, 1.2 when you're living wherever you live, and you move to Alaska, and now the body says, hey, I need more hormones. So you may see your TSH kind of drift up, right? So now it becomes, instead of a 1.2, it's now a 3.9. Right? So that's the range, 0.5 to 4.5. And then for the free T4, that goes from 0.5 to about 1.77. 0.5 to 1.77. And so if you're above that 1.77, then we say that you are, and I'm going to use a phrase here, thyrotoxic. I was going to say thyrotoxicosis. So it just means that you have too much thyroid hormone in your body. It doesn't say what caused it or anything like that. Okay, so that's what we see when we are talking about normal thyroids. So 0.5 to 4.5 for the TSH, 0.5 to 1.77 for the free T4. And there are lots of different labs that we can get. You know, as I mentioned, there's TSH, there's T4, there's T3, there's free T3, free T4. Now, as see how to say this, as you are thinking about the thyroid functions, the thyroid hormones, the labs that they make. So TSH, free T4 are the common ones. Those are the ones that tell us whether the thyroid is functioning. We said it again, TSH and free T4 are the ones that tell us if the thyroid is functioning well. And specifically, as we talk about hypothyroidism, we talk about hyperthyroidism. We'll kind of talk about something else as we get there. Okay, so lots of labs, but TSH, free T4, if those are within the normal range, then we say that that person is what we call euthyroid, so normal thyroid. Now, if we look at those numbers, all right, and I usually think of the TSH and the free T4 like on opposite sides of a seesaw. When one goes up, the other one goes down, and vice versa. Does it make sense? That's the rule. If one goes up, the other one has to go down. So when we look at hypothyroidism, when we're checking the labs, what we are looking for is we're looking for a high TSH and a low free T4. If we get that picture, then we say that that person is hypothyroid. Get that picture, we say that someone is hypothyroid. Okay? All right. Okay. So this is a great place for us to actually break. And I'm going to hop over and we're going to do our amazing question wheel here in a minute. But if you are out there, if you're getting some benefit from what we're doing, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Send this link to somebody who you know that may have hypothyroidism, that may be struggling with Hashimoto's, that may want to know about this. And go ahead and subscribe if you have not already done so to our channel. And you can find us on all of our social media platforms. I think I can pop that. There we are. So there it is, right over here. No, over that side. Yeah, over here. Right there. So Dwayne Wood MD, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Right. So all of those places you can find us on our social media platform. Really appreciate when you guys are out there.
The moments that make you.
Bingo! All right.
The new way to stream the Grizzlies live.
Yes, sir.
Start watching today.
All right. So, yeah, I got to get rid of that sound. Let's pop up here and let's get back to our amazing question wheel. Let's pop that up for. But if you do have questions about the thyroid, make sure you drop those in the comments. You can also drop them into our any of our social media platforms. Any of our social media platforms, and we will be sure to get back to you with those answers. All right. So let's see if we can pull up our amazing question wheel here, and let's get over there. All right, so here we are. So our amazing question wheel, and you will see those questions on the screen. Once again, if you want your question to show up on the screen, go ahead and send it to one of our social media. You can DM, actually here in YouTube, you can put those in the comments. And as I mentioned, on our social media platforms, you can go ahead and send us there as well. And let me see if I can get that up so that you guys will see. Here we go. Okay, so right there, you see it right under my picture. So Dwayne Wood MD on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, so on and so forth. Right. So if you want your question to show up there, go ahead and send it in, and we will put it on the wheel, and we'll give you a shout out. Okay, shout out for that. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to spin the wheel, and we're going to land on a question. Whatever question comes up, I'm going to answer that. And when I answer that, I'm going to take that little clip. I'm going to create a short, a reel, whatever it's called on those social media platforms, just like we did. And let's pop over here, right? So all these guys right here, a lot of these were created here on the show, right? So we're created here on the show. So we're going to do that, and then I want you to go find it. And when you find it, I want you to put in the comments, hashtag I was there. Hashtag I was there. Okay, so let's do that real quick. I'm going to spinning a wheel, around and round and round it goes. Where it stops, I don't know. All right. What is the treatment for excessive hair growth? What is the treatment for excessive hair growth? Let me think about that one for a second. Probably a little context. I'm assuming that they're talking about PCOS. I'm assuming they're talking about PCOS. What is the treatment for excessive hair growth? Okay, let's get over there. We'll come back and put some comments up in a minute. I see some folks popping in. Okay. So here we go. So what is, and let me get 45 seconds on the clock. 45. What is the treatment for excessive hair growth? Here we go. What is the treatment for excessive hair growth? And here I'm assuming that we're talking about polycystic ovarian syndrome. So the treatment for excessive hair growth, there are 3 things that we can do. One, we can start someone on birth control. And so birth control will regulate their hormones. It will help to offset the testosterone. Electrolysis is another one. And then there's a medication called spironolactone that sometimes we'll give that will help with the excessive hair growth. All right, so I think I did that. I think I got that. But yeah, that's a very good question. Excessive hair growth, and it is a big problem for people who may have polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's called hirsutism, which is excessive hair growth. And here we see Janet. Hey, Janet, thanks for coming through. She says, "Hi, Doc. Sorry I'm late. I'll be watching the replay." So glad that you were here. She said, "I love your short videos. So much good information." And that's right, Dad. I did it. I did it. All right. So we're talking about. Thanks for coming through, Janet. Glad that you are. Glad that you're here, and you're not late. You're right on time. You're right on time. So we've been talking about hypothyroidism. We're talking about Hashimoto's hypothyroidism in particular, which is an autoimmune disease. Now, let me pause here to comment about autoimmune diseases, because this is also an area that confuses a lot of people. So autoimmune diseases, we think occur because the body produced an antibody, your system produced an antibody that did its job, right? We think that you had a cold, you had some infection, you had a virus, you had some foreign entity that entered your body. The body produced the antibodies to fight them, which they did. But the body is smart, and it wants to make sure that if it sees that thing again, that it's able to fight it. And so it produced an excess, we believe, amount of hormone or antibodies, and those antibodies are floating around your system, and they are surveying, they're looking for this thing. In the process, though, it's almost like they get confused. Like I gave you the example of the security guards who came to your house to protect the house. They protected the house, but then some of them stayed. And now they're finding stuff all over your house. They're breaking up your windows. They're, busting up your bricks. They're tearing up your lawn, right? Now they came and they did their job, but now we have the excess, and they're not sure what to do. And we think that that's how an autoimmune process starts, an autoimmune disease. And there are lots of autoimmune diseases, right? So we've been talking about Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease. Vitiligo, right? So hair loss, skin changes in the color of the skin, or alopecia, right? Hair loss. We've got lupus, which is an autoimmune disease. Diabetes is an autoimmune disease, right? So there are all these different disease processes that are autoimmune. And, if you're out there, if you're doing some research right now, right? If you can figure out, how we can manage the autoimmune process, oh my goodness, that would be so beneficial to so many of our patients, right? So autoimmune diseases. Okay, so back to hypothyroidism. So we've kind of walked through the hypothyroidism. We've walked through the idea of Hashimoto's and how that works. Now, if we look at the thyroid itself, so what begins happening over time is the amount of hormone that the body can produce from the thyroid, it begins to decrease, right? Because now we're causing damage to the thyroid. And every time the antibodies are attacking the thyroid, they're causing the inflammation. There is, like I said, kind of like that meat tenderizer. Every time you hit it, you're breaking up some of those fibers. And those fibers, those parts of the thyroid can no longer make hormone. And if you keep doing that, if you do that enough, eventually what starts happening is the amount of hormone the body makes begins to decrease. And so we see less of the hormone, remember the free T4, less of the hormone is produced, and then the brain is sending a higher signal. So just like the seesaw I mentioned, one side goes down and the other side goes up. So you'll see low free T4 and high TSH, and that is what we call hypothyroidism. And that occurs in this case because of the damage that's being done by the antibodies that are in your system. Hope that makes sense to everyone. So what are the symptoms? What are the symptoms of hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's? Now, because Hashimoto's can occur without causing hypothyroidism, a lot of times people don't have symptoms, at least at the beginning, right? They don't have symptoms of hypothyroidism just because they have Hashimoto's. But as they progress and those antibodies continue to damage the thyroid, then they begin showing up with some of the symptoms that we recognize as hypothyroid symptoms. So things like depression and fatigue. Remember, we said that the thyroid is responsible for metabolism and energy. So if your thyroid is not producing enough energy, everything in the body begins to slow down. So everything begins to slow down, right? So that's why people sometimes will have a foggy thinking. Like I just can't, it's there, but I'm confused, right? Because your brain is now slowing down. So people can be confused, or that foggy, say it's like I'm in a fog, or I can't process, right? They can have depression. When we said everything slows down, so they can have constipation, right? Because the GI tract slows down. They can have an abnormal heart rate because the heart is slowing down now. They put on weight because their metabolism slows down, and so now we're not burning that same amount of energy. And of course, they get tired, they fatigue, right? So they're working and boom. A lot of people will say it's like they're going through the day and they hit this wall. That's right. Usually people say right at 3:00, I hit this wall. They can have dry skin. And because the thyroid is responsible for energy in the body, the generation of heat, if the thyroid is not functioning, they can have cold, what we call cold intolerance. So everybody else is normal and they're wearing hair muffs and they've got hats on and they got scarves and they got sweaters, right? Now, there are some other things that can cause those symptoms, right? So it may not just be thyroid, but it can cause some other things as well. So Florence is giving us a hand clap. I think she's talking about the amazing question wheel. So thank you for that, Florence. And then who is more likely at risk for having Hashimoto's? Is it also true that it affects more women than men? Thanks, Doc. Okay, so that is a great question, Florence. And so let's hop over to that. So who is more likely to have Hashimoto's? Hashimoto's autoimmune diseases are more common in women, right? So all autoimmune diseases are more common in women. And we think that partially that's because women go through, menstrual cycles. And so there is this change in their body on a monthly basis. And we think that the changes that happen with the hormones and the proteins, that it gives the body an additional amount of a protein that it can react to, if that makes sense. Right. So guys, we what we have is what we have. It is what it is. But for women, they go through this change every month. And we think that sets up the ability for the body to become sensitized to itself. Now, one of the big times that we see this, autoimmune diseases is post-pregnancy. So during pregnancy, for that 10 months, 9 months, 9.5 months, whatever, that the baby is in, the body shuts down its immune system for the most part, right? Not everything. Because we want that baby to come to term. So the body, the baby is actually a foreign entity in mom. And so during that process, the body decreases the immune system so that it doesn't attack the baby. Now, once the baby is delivered, then the body says, wait a minute, for 9 months, 9.5 months, for 10 months, I have been not doing my job. And so it goes into super mode, right? So now it's catching everything. And even stuff that wasn't there before, the body begins looking at. And so a lot of times people will develop autoimmune diseases post-pregnancy. For people who have autoimmune diseases before they get pregnant, a lot of time the disease gets better during pregnancy, right? Because I've had people say, man, I have psoriasis and my skin is great. I have rheumatoid arthritis and I don't feel anything, right? And the reason they don't is because during pregnancy, the body shuts down or decreases the immune system. And then when they deliver, of course, those symptoms come back. Okay. And then, is it also true that it affects more women than men? And yes, and for the reasons that I just indicated. Now, hypothyroidism can occur at any age, but it's most commonly seen in middle-aged women. Most commonly seen in middle-aged women. Jenna says, well, that's not fair. It is. I know, Janet. I know. It isn't. It isn't. She says, so interesting. Our bodies are fascinating. Man, this body that we have is so amazing. The things that it is able to do, right? And one day I may do a show on homeostasis, which is the body's ability to maintain sameness, right? Because within a certain range, there's so many things in our body that if it gets out of that range, that we get into trouble, where we have diseases and so forth. But the body regulates that. So, I mean, just amazing. Yes. The body's an amazing thing. So that is, so those are the symptoms of hypothyroidism. So once again, you can have Hashimoto's thyroiditis without it leading to hypothyroidism, right? Because not everybody who has Hashimoto's gets hypothyroidism. But if you have hypothyroidism, the most common reason for that is Hashimoto's. Now, there are other things that can cause hypothyroidism, obviously, right? So if you have surgery, they take the thyroid out, then you become hypothyroid. If you have congenital, so you're born without a thyroid or smaller thyroid, then you have hypothyroidism. If we treat you for overactive thyroid with radiation, or if you have thyroid cancer, once again, so those are causes of hypothyroidism. We treat them typically the same way in terms of the medication, but in this case, it's an autoimmune process where the body itself is attacking the system. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? All right, so those are the symptoms. So thyroid peroxidase is, and we haven't talked about this yet, but it is one of the markers of whether there is an autoimmune process going on. So we can actually measure the antibodies in your system. And one of them is this thing called thyroid peroxidase antibody. And the thyroid peroxidase is something in your thyroid that is able to help the thyroid make the hormones that you need. And these antibodies, these things that are floating around, they begin attacking the thyroid peroxidase. So they're basically damaging the thing in the body, in the thyroid, that's helping to make the hormone. And once the damage occurs to a certain extent, then the body is unable to make any more hormone, or the amount of hormone that it makes decreases. Right? So when we talk about thyroid, once again, we are talking about how do we normalize your levels and how do we make you feel better? How do we normalize your levels and how do we make you feel better? Now, this can be a huge discussion on its own because, and I'm looking over at my amazing question wheel, and there's a question on there about the regulation of thyroid hormone. And I see someone popping in. Hey, Karen. All right. So here's a question. So Karen says, thanks for coming through, by the way, Karen. Thanks for being here. She says, if the thyroid was removed due to cancer, can you still get Hashimoto's? So a couple of answers to that one, Karen. And the general answer is no, right? Because you shouldn't have anything in your body that the thyroid or that the body can then attack. Does that make sense? All right. So Hashimoto's is autoimmune process or antibodies against the thyroid itself. So if there's no thyroid, then someone cannot get Hashimoto's. Now, let's talk about thyroid cancer. And I got to be careful as I answer this, because when we do surgery for anything, for instance, the thyroid, we take out all of the thyroid. That's what we think. And if we have thyroid cancer, one of the things that you may know, anybody who's out there know, that we do what's called suppressive therapy. And suppressive therapy is where we keep the TSH really, really, really low. And the reason we keep the TSH really, really low is that we don't want the TSH, which is called thyroid stimulating hormone. We don't want the thyroid stimulating hormone to find that one cell that may be still left and cause it to grow. So that's why we do suppressive therapy. So theoretically, if we took out all the thyroid, then someone cannot develop Hashimoto's. But if there is any residual tissue that's left, right, then theoretically the body can still attack that, and now you can develop Hashimoto's. So now you develop the antibodies. I hope that made sense. So Janet saying, good question, Karen. Yeah, very good question. She said, hey, Doc, what's up, Karen? So hopefully that answers the question. If you have additional questions on that, go ahead and you just drop it in the comments. So as we are talking about hypothyroidism, the goal is to normalize the hormone, your levels, and to make you feel better. So that if we normalize the hormone, then our goal is if the hormones are normal, then you should feel better. And so we try to get our thyroid functions, right? Those two numbers, TSH and free T4. We try to get the TSH between 0.5 and 4.5. Now, I'm not going to go into some of the details because there's some thought that we should keep the TSH lower, right? So even though the upper limit of TSH is 4.5, a lot of people say we shouldn't keep it that high. It should be actually below 2, right? So that's for another show. But between 4.5 and 4.5. And then the free T4 the normal is between 0.5 and 1.77. So if we can keep it between those two, then we say that the thyroid functions themselves are in the normal range. Now, one conversation that I have with my patients, and I tell them, once I normalize the number, so we put you on medication and we normalize the number, then my part of the job is almost done. Then the patient, right, the person that I'm seeing, they get to put in their thoughts and what's going on. Right, so they get to say to me, hey, Dr. Wood, I know that the TSH is 3.5 and the free T4 is 1.2, whatever the numbers are, but I still don't feel good. I'm still tired. I'm still fatigued. My hair's falling out. My skin is still dry. They get to tell me all those things. And what do? As a team now, we go back and we adjust their medication. And we'll adjust the medication, this dose and that dose, and we'll try different medications. And then at some point, I'll say to them, okay, which dose do you feel the best? Right. So notice we got the numbers in the normal range. So that's the first part of the exercise, to get the numbers in the normal range. And then now we start saying, hey, this symptom is still left, or that symptom is still left, or this thing is still going on. And we adjust the dose to try to see if we can minimize those. And then if we've adjusted, we've got them in the normal range, and we've tried a bunch of different doses, and we say, hey, this is the dose that we felt the best at. If there are other things that are still left, then we said those things are probably due to something else. Does that make sense? So that's the process that we go through. All right. So now, this part of the conversation, this is the part that everybody who's out there, who is on the internet, you'll go and you can Google stuff and you'll find, this guy somewhere says he found this thing and this thing that works better and that thing, and there's something else in the thyroid that's going on. This is the part that is causing all this trouble. I shouldn't say trouble, causing all this discussion. Right? Is that a good way to put it? This is causing all this discussion. And so what is it? So the question is, can we prevent Hashimoto's? Because we said it's an autoimmune process. Can we prevent it? If someone has it, can we reverse it? And if someone has Hashimoto's that's caused hypothyroidism, can that be fixed? Okay? Can that be fixed? Now, as I mentioned, if we believe that this entire process is due to inflammation, so we think in inflammatory processes, right? So for instance, I'm under these lights, and we think these lights cause ionizing radiation. I've got my cup right here, right? And I would love to tell you that it has water in it, but it doesn't have water in it. It has some, what does it have? This is it's a punch, and it's mixed with pineapple and apples. Okay? And it says 100% juice, but as you know, right? As you know that sugar and refined foods are pro-inflammatory. So they cause inflammation. So our processed foods cause inflammation in the body. Certain things that we eat cause inflammation in the body. The way we sleep or don't sleep, the stress that we manage or don't manage, right? All those things cause inflammatory processes in the body. So if we are able to decrease the inflammation by fixing some of those things, then theoretically, then we can either decrease We can either decrease the inflammation that's going on in the thyroid, or we can delay it, or for some people, they think we can prevent it. Right? I'm not going to quite go to the prevent part because I'm not sure, right? We're not sure. And that's the big thing about all of this, right? So there's so much that we don't know about. And Janet just said a minute ago that the body is amazing. It is extremely amazing. I mean, it does things that we can't even imagine. And so we don't know everything about the body. And we're still learning. So there's some people who believe, and hey, what's up, David? Thanks for coming through, man. I didn't see you there. I just looked down. I didn't see you. And Karen says, okay, it makes sense. Okay, I think Karen is talking about my explanation for thyroid cancer and Hashimoto's. Yeah. So if we can decrease inflammation, then theoretically we can decrease the inflammatory process, we can decrease the autoimmune process, we can decrease the Hashimoto's, and we can decrease the progression to hypothyroidism. So what are some things that people say we can avoid? So things like there are people who have intolerance to gluten intolerance. There's people who have soy problems with soy. Some of the nuts, nightshade plants, so things like tomatoes, right? Or eggplant, which are nightshade plants. They cause some inflammation. In fact, sometimes we'll tell people who have rheumatoid arthritis, right? So joint issue, that if they start to feel that it's acting up, cut back on their tomatoes or eggplants. So there are dietary things that we can do. And I'll tell you that I have patients who have tried the dietary things who swear by it, because they say when they did that, when they cut back on the gluten, when they cut back on the breads, when they cut back on the refined foods, when they cut out sugar, when they, and they go through all these things, they now don't have the symptoms. Now, I've tried in our office, and there are a couple of people that we kind of work with, and we've looked at their thyroid peroxidase antibody, so that TPO that I mentioned earlier, and we've tried different things for them to do, right? So they cut out this and they cut back on that, they exercised, they went to bed on time, and we have seen some decrease in the thyroid peroxidase. Now, that is not statistically significant, right? So I can't tell you that if I have 100 people that, 55% of them are going to get better TPO because of that, right? This was just, I have some people who said, well, can we try it? Can we try it? There are a couple of books, and I'm thinking about those. One is called The Autoimmune Solution, and I think that's on my website, The Autoimmune Solution. If you go to dewcenter.com, that's the website for our practice. I think that's there. And then there's another one called Why Do I Still Have Symptoms If My Thyroid Functions Are Normal? Okay, so a couple of books there. But that's the idea. So we are in the process of trying to improve our lives, right? So we want symptoms to improve, right? We want to normalize the numbers. We want symptoms to improve. And I hope this gave you a good idea, a good overview of the thyroid as it relates to Hashimoto's thyroiditis and as it relates to hypothyroidism. Here, for this month, I want you, if you've not talked to your doctor and you're having symptoms, have them take a look at your thyroid, right? So Thyroid Awareness Month is what we're going through right now, the month of January. And so you want to make sure that that you talk with your primary care physician or your medical provider is the word I was looking for. Talk to your medical provider about what you can do and get your thyroid evaluated. Awesome. All right, so guys, thank you, and gals, thank you for being here. Once again, if you've not already done so, please go back and look at our channel. Make sure that you, first of all, sign up, that you are looking and getting notifications. You want to subscribe to the channel. If you don't have an account, go ahead and create an account so that you'll be getting the notifications. There are lots of things that we've done through the last several months, and actually going way back. We've been doing this for about 2.5 years now. So there are videos, way back, where we started, and I want to make sure that you see that there's something there for you, something there for everyone. We've talked about thyroid, we've talked about the pituitary, we've talked about how to improve our lives, how to set goals. All of those things are there. So make sure you get out there and do it, and then come on back, because we are here. We're here every Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time, and we're going to be continuing our talk about the thyroid over the next 2 weeks. We'll talk about different aspects of the thyroid. Tonight we talked about Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. Once again, thank you. This is Dr. Dwayne Wood. That's Wood with an E. Here on the channel, I educate, I empower, I encourage you to take charge of your life, your health, avoid complications, and create the life you've always wanted, and go to the next level. If you have not already done so as well, please make sure you get over to our website, and you'll remember that we have that free offering that we give, 7 Keys to Success. 7 Keys to Success. Let's see. I think it should be on this one right here. All right. So 7 Keys to Success. If you hit that button, you'll be able to get in there and get our book, learn how successful people create the life they want. That's something that we've provided for you. We've started a blog. All right. So right now we've got a couple of things out there the last 3 weeks. So that's going to come out a new article every week. Right. So the benefits of treating hypothyroidism, papillary thyroid cancer, how to make 2023 the year you get unstuck. Right. So make sure you get over there and pay attention to those. And then for those of you who are interested in working with me, please make sure you get over and look at our coaching program. Now, one thing that I was talking to some friends about, we actually, if you have friends who don't do YouTube, who don't do anything else, they don't go on social media, we also have our podcast where they can go back and listen to different shows that we've done. We've put some of the shows up there, and we'll be providing additional content. And it's called Do You Know? The Do You Know podcast with Dr. Dwayne Wood. All right. So that's it, man. So lots of stuff going on in this new year, and really appreciate you all. Thank you, Janet. Janet says, thanks, Dr. Thanks you so much, Dwayne. Thanks for coming through, everybody. And we will see you next week at the next show. Good night.